excited about today's workshop because I think we all know how much of an important impact our environment has on us. And that's what we're going to learn more about today. And when I heard about Demco's workshop for today, I was really happy about the aspect of how we take educators into account as well as students. I know that, all the years that I was working in schools as a teacher and as a principal and a few other things, whenever a time of change came with regard to environment, design, furniture, etc., students really were, rightly so, put at the center of decision making. And now it's good to see that educators' needs are also being perhaps considered a little more than they were in the past. So I found that pretty exciting. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg Richardson, who is the business development representative from Demco, and he will tell us a lot more about Demco and then introduce our facilitator for today, Dr. Robert Dillon. Greg, welcome.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Greg Richardson. I am the business development representative for the state of New York. I will also be at the conference at the end of the month in Cooperstown, and I'm looking very forward to that. It's been a couple of years since I've been on site for your conferences, and they're always a good time. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about Demco. Demco is a company that's actually based out of Madison, Wisconsin. With about 120 years of experience. We've spent many, many years supporting schools and libraries in the United States. We have learned through the years that it's not exactly the focus on the classroom, but the learning environment of the classroom. No more do we look at the classroom as just desks and chairs, but a complete learning environment. We work with over about 130 vendors and also offer a Demco proprietary brand, so that we're able to offer furniture choices for every area of your school or library. We offer a wide range of full services that include space design, project management, install services, and obviously the products themselves. Our process has been streamlined with our consultative sales approach to create an effective learning environment. Our knowledgeable consultants will take you through a needs assessment that will go over the design philosophy that is on the screen right now that will include all aspects of your classroom. We offer many state and national contracts to help facilitate the PO and to make you very confident on the pricing. This slide over here that you're looking at, when we do our design and we do our consultative sales approach, again, we don't talk about products. We don't really talk about the desks and the chairs and, bookshelves and all that type of thing. What we really like to do is we like to look at your goals and really what you're trying to accomplish for the space. And then we're going to look into other aspects of it, such as flexibility, variety of choice, collaboration, different zonings where you can have different activities going on in one particular room, and then obviously the aesthetics of what we do as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have several contracts that we have available in New York State. We generally use the Omnia, the New York State, TIPS, E&I, and then we also see Ed Data as well. We have about 200 contracts total. So if there is not a contract here that you see that you generally would use or like to use per grant or funding needs that is needed, we can certainly facilitate those types of things. When it comes to our design with our vendors, we work with many, many, many folks. A lot of these, I'm sure many of you already have in your schools. Which allows us to many times either match up current designs that you have going on or go with something completely different. And it would be anything from a classroom, makerspace, science, libraries, so on and so forth. My information is right here. Again, I'm going to be at the show. So please stop by, say hi. I love the chit chat, and that's it. So thank you very much. Without further ado, it's Dr. Robert Dillon.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks to Demco, and thanks, Karen, everyone. It's good to be with you. I won't be in Cooperstown, but it is one of the most beautiful little villages in the nation, and I have been there a number of times, and it's good to be here. I was a school principal, and that's where this work started for me. I was a middle school principal for 15 years, and I was in an expeditionary learning school, and we were taking kids outside, out into the community, beyond the community, and I was seeing kids come to life. I was seeing kids that just lit up. And then we were bringing them back into classrooms and they were wilting. And I realized something had to change. Now, I knew that our classrooms would never be the mountains and our classrooms would never be the oceans, but our classrooms could be designed in a way that supported the well-being of our students. And that's where the journey began for me. So 6 or 7 years ago, I moved away from my work with the district and started to work full-time with schools around the country, optimizing their learning spaces. It's a rarity that I'm at the ground level of building a brand new building or bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of furniture. My work is primarily with schools that are saying, this is kind of what we're going to have. We might be able to add a few things. How can we best use what we have? How can we make sure the walls of our classrooms, how can we make sure the designs of our hallways and our libraries really are impactful for our students? And see, that's where we go today is and I think that Karen was right on, is that when we talk about new initiatives with schools, we are often talking about how do we increase achievement, however we define that. But we know that amazing professionals are in our spaces every day. And it's important for us as leaders to give them everything they can to be as effective and as efficient as possible. So today, I'm going to talk through some of the stories where that's happened. I'm going to talk about the importance of right now, why we need to think about things like retention and satisfaction and effectiveness. And hopefully you'll walk away with a couple of ideas that you can take back to your school and maybe even use before the end of the week. That's certainly my hope as we go forward here. So recently, at an accelerated level, I've been hearing teachers say things like, I'm looking for a place that values me. And sometimes that's all over the place. But what I'm starting to realize is that the environment, the space where people work, sends a really strong message. Many of us work in 100-year-old buildings and 50-year-old buildings and 25-year-old buildings, and those buildings can send nonverbal messages to our teachers that they are valued if they're designed the right way. But things in disrepair, things left till the next budget cycle, all of those things start to send nonverbal messages. You can be the principal that says, I value you, I love that you're here, I want you to do amazing things for kids. And the backdrop is a building that's non-verbally pushing back against those words. So you don't want teachers to start saying things like, I could go work at the district with that new school. And in many parts of the country, we are seeing where people are district and school shopping based on the space in which they have the opportunity to work. When I was a teacher, I never would have thought that that was a possibility, but I know many teachers in many states that have said, the salary is the same, the kids are the same. If I have to work in that room with no windows that kind of smells funny and has 7-foot ceilings, or I can be in a brand new building with 1,200 square feet, I'm going to go over there. Now, we don't want to create an arms race, right? It doesn't mean that every school needs to build a new building so they can retain their teachers. But because of where we are with the labor market, more and more people are shopping for the right place for them to be teachers. And so that is something I'm seeing across the country as I step into all kinds of places. So again, it doesn't matter. This type of building can send a really strong message. This type of building can send a really strong message that we value you. We want you to be satisfied here. We want you to be effective in your practice here. We want you to be here. Even brand new buildings. I've seen all the things. I've seen a brand new building turn teachers away, and I've seen a 100-year-old building be the perfect place for teachers to work because of the little details, not only just the furniture, but how you think all of the elements of design. So we do know, the research tells us, well-designed classrooms will help students be more effective in their learning. I can't draw a straight line from designing learning spaces directly to academic achievement, but I can tell you the research does tell us when kids are more engaged and kids are more satisfied about where they're learning, we've got the best chance available for them to be academically successful. So ultimately, we know this. We know that for many years, you as school leaders have been thinking a lot about what kids should learn. The curriculum, right? Should it be these standards? Should it be these topics? What should kids be learning? And that's an important debate, and it will continue in perpetuity. We also talk about in detail how kids learn. Should they be active? Should they be exploring? Should it be discovery based? How much lecture should there be? How much? All of those are important debates. The debate that's kind of gotten left behind is about where students should learn. You know, there's a robust debate. Should that be at home? Should that be in the forest? Should that be in the community? How much should be in a classroom? How much should be in common spaces? I want that debate to continue, because if we debate that, we give ourselves the best chance of designing space for our students and our teachers, which I think is really important. So where you learn matters, but where you teach matters as well. I've been around a lot of teachers. They're amazing solution makers. Yesterday I was in Rye, New York with a group of teachers, and we were talking specifically about learning environments in all of their buildings. And while I was there, teachers were saying, you know what? We always make it work. We figure out a way. And I know that teachers do that. They figure out a way, they make it work. But what if we could actually allow for our learning spaces to be tailwinds for our teachers and not headwinds, right? We have so many teachers that are great despite their space, not because of their space. And I think it's an important thing that we continue to think about. What we know is this, is that modern learning, the kind of things that we know activate kids, make learning sticky, are hard to fully realize in our current facilities. Sometimes it's about natural light, and sometimes it's about we have 36 kids in a 650-foot square classroom. But we have to think bigger about our learning facilities so that our teachers have the best chance possible with the things that they're trying to get to kids. We also know the science of space design, not NASA, right? Not the science of space, but the science of space design really is starting to show us what should be the elements of the minimum viable classroom. And let me mention what this means and unpack this for a second. So the minimum viable classroom says that every room in our school, every room in our district will provide students at least these opportunities, right? It shouldn't be a lottery on whether a kid gets placed in classroom A, where a teacher's thinking about space design, and classroom B, where a teacher's collected everything and is the hoarder in their classroom. That's not fair to kids. Our classrooms in general should have some minimum guarantee about what's in those classrooms, not only for the learners, but for the teachers. The idea that technology works and you can see it. The idea that the noises in the room aren't to a point where it's distracting to kids. That all of the stuff in the room doesn't create so much visual noise that kids can't focus and have attention, that teachers can't focus and have attention. Sometimes as teachers, sometimes as facilitators of learning, I find myself distracted by the environment in which I'm trying to operate. So we need to keep relying on the science and relying on the research as we think about how do we craft these for our teachers. And again, we know this, right? Most of our leaders and many of you have thought about how can we make the space better for this student. And I would just say the best way to make it effective for all of your students is to make it effective for your teachers, because you are investing about 80% of your budget as a district on people, right? And if your classroom is even stealing 1%, 5%, 10% of their efficiency and effectiveness because of the space, just think of the budgetary waste that goes along with that. So we really want to fine tune our spaces, because it's going to negatively impact those in the classroom if we're not thinking about what we can provide them as we go. So 3 focuses today: one about retention, one about satisfaction, one about effectiveness. And as we hit the end of these, I'm going to ask you to go into the chat and throw a question in there, throw some comments in there, and feel free to do that at any point in time. I'm eyeballing the chat down here with my bottom of my left eye, so I will be able to respond if you throw something down there in the chat. I read in Forbes that this number moves around, and maybe this is a corporate number, not an educational number, and there's a debate to be had about all of those things. But rehiring versus retention can cost as much as 33% of that current person's compensation, right? That's the recruitment, that's going out and finding people, that's going to job fairs, that's the onboarding cost, that's the training cost, that's how you use all your technology platform costs. We want to keep the people we have and make them better at their work. And allowing the space to do that is super important. So one of the reasons why we have to think about space is that if anyone chooses to leave because of the space they teach in, it's going to be a huge cost to our budget. The second is, we know, and in many places of the state of New York, the labor market is soft. It's tight, right? Like, it's in a place where there are only a few applicants for a really interesting job, right? Like, if I want to be a physics teacher at your high school, I may or may not get more than 5 applicants. And some of you are laughing, saying, no, we get 0. We have to go out and actually just find that person. But when the labor market is the way it is, we have to make sure that everything we do, including space design, make sure that our folks stick around. The other thing about turnover is this, and as a middle school principal, I totally understood this. Okay, I had a staff that was kind of small, 30 or 40 staff members. And within that staff, if I rolled over 2 or 3 people, 10% didn't know the systems, didn't know the processes, didn't know the procedures. And I had to spend a lot of my leadership energy getting them enculturated on how we do things in the school. So every time that our space drives somebody away, we have a huge cost in finding people, the cost that comes with actually bringing them on board, and then making them a part of the team. And so I want us to avoid that by being thoughtful and saying, you know what, if I think a little bit more about my space design, if I'm responsive to my teachers and the things they need with their space, I'm going to continue to lock them up year after year to provide for our students. So here's some things that you can do. So of the slides there, right there, there's 4 things. So in this area, I'm going to ask you to say, hey, maybe I'll choose one of these. Number 1, increase teacher voice around classroom and school facility changes. There are leaders now all around the country that have a teacher design team as a standing committee. They go and they look at different spaces in the building. One of my favorite activities with that is this. Let's go and figure out where the 5 or 6 or 7 items in our school are where we tour people. And then what are the 5 or 6 or 7 items that are the non-tour? The places we would never take people. We never go back by the loading dock. We don't go in the back of the cafeteria. Sometimes we don't go in the back of our library. But when we start identifying where these problem places are, sometimes they're in classrooms, sometimes they're in common spaces, sometimes they're in places we didn't suspect. That's letting teachers be a part of the change process as it relates to design. It's not about maintenance then. It's not about custodial. It's not about someone who's buying furniture. It's we are helping to design better classrooms and better spaces. And so I think it's important. How do we get more teacher voice into the conversation about not only their classroom, but all of the spaces around the school that need to continue to improve? Number two, a leader needs to ask for feedback on the changes that are needed for teachers. Now, the first time you ask your teachers, they might say, I'm good, I'll make it work. We have to stay with it. Feedback cycles start to unpeel the onion. We have to ask multiple times. No, really, what could I give you? What could I get you to support that? Does it mean that every time you're going to be able to fulfill that wish? Absolutely not. And teachers know they're not going to say, well, if you took all of my furniture out of here and gave me all new. Most folks can say, hey, if you could just get rid of this broken piece of furniture out of my room, that would be really helpful. Anyway, you could fix that shade over there because it always is letting the sun in on these 3 kids. What are some small things you can do to show that you care about the space? And even tying that directly. Hey, I want to help you with your space because I know it'll help you be more effective and more efficient. Next, start to build some collaborative design projects that kind of foster common goals. As a staff, we are going to help design the mural that's going to go in the gym and paint over the ones from 1925. How can we make sure that we have these collaborative design projects that go well beyond the architect, the designer, the artist, because our teachers are the ones that need to feel the ownership of the entire building, especially their classrooms. And finally, continue to showcase growth in your school and around the district. There are little design choices each day in every school that is making that school better. And we have to kind of build the snowball. Where are the little things? Where are the little things? Where are the pictures of the change that are happening to show people and give people hope about their space? Without that, we raise the ante and we give people a chance to say, I want to go somewhere where I'm valued. Maybe I'll go down the street to the place where I can teach with more natural light. We want to take those things away by supporting, listening, and providing where we can. That's going to lower our chances of retention for sure. Some quick stories around that. This is a school in Texas where they decided they were going to design this common space. But what I loved was the teachers were a part of this process. They knew that they didn't want to waste this space. And because the teachers were a part of this design process from the beginning, the teachers felt valued and they were able to be more effective and efficient because they learned from the very beginning how to use this space as a breakout space for their students. You know, sometimes it's about equipment and paint and decals. Sometimes it's little things we can do at low cost that can help our teachers. You know, I'd really like to have 2 or 3 stools. Sometimes that's it to make people feel valued and want to stick around. Now, this is the first space that I designed a long time ago. It was an old computer lab, but it was a collaborative project where we came together to decide what we wanted it to be next. And finally, it can be creative, it can be flexible, it can be active. All of these types of spaces are available. Sometimes they're in hallways, sometimes they're in cafeterias, but each one of these projects starts to say to teachers, the space matters, our environment matters, and I want you to exist in an environment that is healthy for you and supports you as we go along. All right. This is a good time to go down to the chat. What's something you heard that stuck with you? Or what's one question that you might have that you want to make sure that I answer in the next chunk of time that I have here? So I'm going to give that about 15 or 20 seconds because there's think time and writing time when you're in a virtual session to get things into the chat box. All right, I will hit that question in 1 second. Let some other ones end up there as well. Yeah, someone sent one in the background to me. So number 2 focus is teacher satisfaction. So we talked about retention, and some of you are saying, I'm not really worried about retention. I've had a pretty stable staff. They've been with me for 10 years. there's not a lot of movement, I'm good. But I'm always looking to make sure that my teachers are happy, because happy teachers make for happy learning. So let's talk about what some of the things are that could allow for that to be a part of the puzzle as we go. One is, we know that teachers that are satisfied are connected to our teacher attendance rate. And I know as a principal that every time one of my teachers was out, it was a super big headache for me in the morning. Are we going to cover that? Do we have a sub? Are they coming in? It started my whole day in a frenzy when I had a teacher that didn't come in. And sometimes it's that teachers are sick. And sometimes I've been in places where it's actually I'm fatigued from being in a learning space that has worn me down. So if we have teachers that are satisfied with the spaces they're teaching in, it's going to help their attendance. And actually, it's going to just continue to help their ability to bring the right mood and bring the right energy to the classroom. I mentioned this before, and I just wanted to come back to this piece though, right? This idea about, don't worry, I'll figure it out a way to make it work. So many teachers around the country say this all the time. I'll be okay. I'll make it work. I use duct tape. I put that piece of furniture back together. I know it's propped up on a wheel, but I make it work. I know that that's a piece that could work. But again, the space is, the teachers are making it work despite the space, not because of the space. So if teachers ever say that, I'm always like, lean in and let's work on a solution that goes there together. So here's what I've seen around the country as I've worked and been in residence with different school districts and schools around the country, is that small, responsive actions really do boost baseline satisfaction very quickly. So what does that mean? You know, that old computer monitor has been here a long time. Technology was supposed to take it with them a long time ago. I'll take it with me today. You pick it up, you walk out of the room with it. Now you can argue with who needs to get it from where later, but teachers need to know that you're there to take care of something right now. Now, I'm not saying you have to fix it. Maybe you don't have the ability to fix it. Maybe you can't reach it. But the idea that you can provide small responsive actions to make a space better goes a long way. Hey, that trapezoid table seems a little off. Why is that thing just rocking? You know, I have 3 more of those in the conference room. I'd rather have the one that rocks in the conference room and have one in this room that works well, right? These are all little things that you can do to enhance spaces. It doesn't mean you have to go buy a piece of furniture. Now, it does mean that eventually, yeah, coming up with a furniture plan, having priorities, knowing that if you get some monies or have some monies left in your budget, where you're going to spend them best, absolutely. And we can talk about that at another time. But you as a leader can take a ton of small actions that start to build that satisfaction quite quickly. So here are some ideas, and here are some things to think about. Number 1, have teachers create improvements through a subtraction list. I've never been in a classroom where a teacher's been there for 5 or more years where there weren't at least 5 or more things that could be taken out of the room, right? We can make improvements through subtraction as well as additions. If I could get 3 more tables, sometimes it's like, if I could just get rid of those old dictionaries. I was in a library the other day that had the World Book Encyclopedia from 1994. And I just wondered, in that set of encyclopedias, how many things were no longer true? I have no idea. But I just know that we need to continue to think, what doesn't need to be in our classrooms anymore? How many paper tubes do we need for that project? How many pipe cleaners do we need? How many paper clips do we need? If all of our storage is full, where are we going to put next year's stuff? Is there one horizontal surface that you could get rid of some things? So all of these are subtractions, and all of these give rooms space to breathe. And when our room has space to breathe, you've been in these rooms. They feel good. They make us smile. You've also, as leaders, walked into classrooms and felt claustrophobic, felt bad for kids, and worried that something was going to fall over and you were going to have to send somebody to the nurse. So what can we do to subtract? 2, walk around your building. Get some baseline data of what's going on. What are the elements in the rooms? What patterns are you seeing that are getting in the way of teaching, right? Let's go and find out. If it's the same thing, if it's the same table that's getting in the way, maybe that's part of our prioritization of future furniture. Maybe it's the collection of old curriculum materials and you need to find a new home for those. Maybe instead of having 100 of that old history book, you could get people convinced that maybe if you had 20 and shared them. I know those sound like small things, but small things over time across the building allows a building to breathe. Continue to deprivatize your thinking as a leader. And I could say that about everything, right? We always think we're communicating. We've thought about it 10 times more in our own head than we have what's come out of our mouth. But talk about what you see are priorities for the facility. If teachers know that you're prioritizing facilities and they know what's on the list, they can have hope and see what's coming down the road. And then you can also allow teachers to have feedback. Hey, rank some of these. I see all these are important. Which ones do you think are most important? Why are they important? Which ones should we tackle next? Get more voices into the room, because that's going to lead to teachers that feel more satisfied with their learning environment. Many schools are funding teacher learning space grants. $300, $500. They have a selection process. Sometimes teachers have to go through some learning about learning spaces with me before that they can apply for the grant. So that's worked in many places. But it's amazing that teachers can say, I have an opportunity not to have to spend my own money to apply for a grant that allows things for me and my students to get better. In other schools, it's as easy as a focus on cleanliness. I was at a school recently where teachers were saying, I would be more satisfied if my room was just cleaned in a different way. And I said, well, what do you mean? They spend more time throwing away the trash than they do wiping off the whiteboards. Or they spend more time on the whiteboards than they do sweeping the floor. So as a leader, have you talked with your teachers about what elements of cleanliness they wish they had more of? Doesn't mean we have more staffing for that. It does mean we could be creative. And it does mean if we're responsive to the cleanliness needs of our teachers, and sometimes they're helpful around those sorts of things, we have to ask that to be a solved solution, sometimes with students and teachers and our custodial staffs and maybe our leaders and maybe our cafeteria staff. But if the conversation is, you'll be more satisfied in your space, you'll be more effective and more efficient, I want it to be the way you want it to be, you can work towards how to solve that. And then there's some things we can control and not control, but there are big levers of teacher satisfaction. HVAC, lighting, technology. Now I know some of those you can control, some of those you can be an ambassador for, some of those you can pressure maintenance to handle. Some of those are just going to be limitations of your systems. But when teachers don't have those barriers, when they don't have those headwinds, they can be more effective and more efficient in the work that they're doing. So in this classroom, we are working really hard to make sure that this teacher had what she needed, and we funded a grant. And she wanted to try out a few different types of choice seating. So we got some stools and we got some cushions and we got some pillows. And then we studied what worked. That's the thing that I think is really important, is that learning space design is an ongoing iterative process. It isn't something we do as a leader. It's a priority that continues. And I think we have a lot of those in the work that we do. But I also think that as we go through this, that providing teachers some sense of that can be a really important piece of the puzzle. But have you ever met in a room like this? This doesn't lend itself to satisfaction. It doesn't lend itself to a good meeting. It looks like a chair museum, right? It looks like a curriculum museum. And these aren't the types of spaces that say, I value you and your teaching effectiveness and efficiency is what I'm surrounding you with. So sometimes as leaders, we have control of some spaces, some storage rooms, some conference rooms, some meeting spaces. Start with the things that we can control and send a message. Send a message. We value you. We want you to be satisfied because we know satisfied teachers makes for satisfied learning. And then, yeah, sometimes there's hard conversations, right? Sometimes our teachers choose to have a lot of teacher-only space in their classroom. And sometimes we have to have a conversation that says, you know, this may help you feel effective and efficient, but then you're also saying kids can't move around in my room. There's not a room for everybody. What's going on? So one of the culprits of classrooms that are dysfunctional in movement and flexibility is the percentage of teacher-only space that's in that classroom. So I'm not saying that teacher satisfaction is teachers get whatever they want. I'm saying that we need to make sure that we're right-sized in all of the things and elements of our classrooms. We're right-sized in what goes on the walls. We're right-sized in teacher-only space. We're right-sized in the number of pieces of furniture that are in the room, the number of choices that are there for students. All of those are super important. And then we can get to spaces where now we're modeling and prototyping what modern spaces might look like. So this is a conference room where people come together. Adults learn there, adults meet there, students meet there. So if you're a leader, sometimes it makes sense to find a space where lots of people interact and target that as a place. This is what we're headed towards, because if people can see where you're headed towards, they're going to stick around and they're going to say, hey, they're on the road to getting me the things I need to be effective and efficient. And I just was going to note here, this is a school that decided that they were going to focus on cleanliness, and it went a long way. And this is a middle school, and I've been in a lot of middle schools, and a lot of middle school hallways are gross. This middle school hallway, the 5 times I was there, continued to look like this because they said, we are going to make sure we have a priority on hallways being clean and our classrooms being clean, and the teacher satisfaction rate went way up. All right, the final element I want to talk about, you might be saying, my teachers are happy. I have happy teachers and they're not going anywhere. I don't have to worry about retention. I don't have to worry about them being happy. They're always smiling. They must be happy. Well, how can we make sure that teachers are not only those two things, but they're most effective in all these other changes that we're asking? There's a new curriculum. There's a new instructional practice. There's new technology that we need you to use. How do we make sure that the space doesn't get in the way of all these other changes and it actually comes into sync with what's going on? We need to make sure that all of our spaces don't feel like they get in the way. Like if we do that alone, bring us back to neutral, that's a great starting point for what we're trying to do. We have to realize this, just like our students haven't been taught how to exist in active classrooms, right? Have you ever brought in all kinds of active furniture to a 3rd grade classroom for the first time and said, the kids just don't know how to use it. Like they just are all over the place. We have to explicitly teach that. So one of my roles over the last 5 or 6 years is to come in, work with teachers and say, hey, here's how to best effectively use your classroom to make it active, to make it flexible, to make it engaging, to make it feel welcoming, to make it feel have a sense of belonging. So yes, as you provide more active, flexible spaces for your teachers, there is a sense that they need some level of training, not just how to move a piece of furniture around, but to how to sync it with the learning that happens in that classroom and the learning verbs that are a part of that classroom. Now, this is one of the things that I hate to see. I hate to see teachers that say, you know what, I designed my classroom and the kids love it, but I just can't stand it. It's the weirdest thing for me that teachers, professionals, people that exist in a room for 180 plus days feel like they're victimized by their own space. We can't allow that to happen. And how do we not allow that to happen? We speak up. We tell our teachers, yes, we want to craft this learning environment for students, but we 100% need you to be able to exist in that environment. We need you to be at your best in that environment. Now let's talk about how we balance all of those things. Teachers are not effective when they're victims of their own spaces. So what can we do as leaders to support this? Number one, this is really important. We need to give teachers permission often about their ability to purge and make changes. I run into this all the time. I ask a teacher, why is this poster on the wall? And they say, well, I got told I had to put it there. I said, well, how long ago was that? And it'll be like 7 or 8 years ago. I was like, that's like 3 principals ago. Do you still have to put it there? And they're like, well, I don't know. It's always been there. It just happens to be there. Or, hey, can you put that piece of furniture out in the hall and then it goes off to storage? No, I got told by a custodian a long time ago I couldn't put any furniture in the hallway. Did you check with the principal? There's all these boogeymen about what you can and can't do that really aren't rules, guidelines. So if you're a leader and you want your building to feel lighter, if you want your teachers to be more effective, we have to get the old stuff out so that the new stuff has an opportunity to flourish. So often, purge. There are no communities in the country that are on record in saying we want our classrooms to have old, tired, worn, and broken things in them. We can start by starting to get some of those out of our classrooms. Also, you can lead conversations about how space, instruction, and technology need to be in sync. I have some teachers that'll say things like, you know, I'm really working on my instruction this year. I'm going to do space next year. And it just doesn't work that way. And we all know that those have to happen concurrently. So if a teacher's working on instruction, that instruction is going to be limited if the space gets in the way. So we have to lead and work on those concurrently. Give teachers time and space to visit other spaces, to gather new ideas and best practices. You have a lot of ideas and best practices throughout your building, but like any other thing, it's behind a door. It's something that no one's ever noticed. So how can we do learning walks for the sake of learning about space? We've been doing learning walks for a long time, learn about instruction or how to utilize technology. We want to make sure that we're using that time in that space. If the end of your faculty meeting was go visit one classroom you haven't been in the last month, teachers would walk away with ideas. Finally, as a leader, you can build common principles. You can tell your first grade, what are the 5 or 6 things as a first grade group? If you're a middle school principal, each team should be working on some things. We're going to have less things in our room this year than we had last year. We're going to make sure that there's more writable space for kids so that they can sketch and draw and collaborate. Whatever those are, what common principles could a department, a team, a grade level be working on so that they can hold themselves accountable? I was at this school here working with them, and they had the largest teacher swap meet I've ever seen in my life. Teachers were required to bring one box, and they could bring more, of things they no longer needed into their classroom to the cafeteria. Everyone picked through them. We hope that that one teacher that liked everything in her classroom didn't take all of it back to her classroom. But what we found was we were able to get rid of a lot of things because sometimes teachers want to at least know that the things that they valued and used in their classrooms had at least one last chance to be somewhere else in that school before they went in the dumpster. So it was nice to see that. Even classrooms that look like this need permission to say things like, you know what? Don't put so much furniture in front of the whiteboards. We want kids to have access to those whiteboards to be able to write on. Classrooms like this, we talk about things like how many books should be in a classroom library. More books is not always more. I have to tell our librarians that as well. I don't know what the perfect number is. I'm willing to debate that and have a great conversation. But I'm in too many classrooms where books are out of proportion to the other spaces that are needed in that classroom. Final thoughts. There are no neutral spaces. Space either makes you better or makes you worse. You've been in both. You've been in a place that's too noisy for you to think, and you've been in a space where you've been able to write and be creative. Allow our teachers to be in spaces that make them better. connect the research to the practice. Classrooms that are well designed help with student engagement. And when we have engaged students, it's our best chance. Also, if we have students that are joyful in their learning, it gives them their best chance to be academically successful. So use that research as a lever. That's why we're working on this. And not or, we're doing that for our learners, and we're doing this to make you more effective and more efficient, to give you the tailwinds you need to be fantastic. As a leader, we know this. The potential of any space, the potential of any school is the result of thousands of micro decisions made by hundreds of people. So empower the people around you to take down signs that are old, to straighten up things that are crooked, to send the message that your school is an excellent place, that cares about people, wants them there, wants them to be satisfied in their workplace, and wants them to be truly effective in what they're doing. I appreciate your time and attention, and I look forward to seeing many of the success stories that you might have around space going forward in the work that we're doing. And if I can be of any help, I am always a resource for anybody that I work with. Send me an email, send me any type of correspondence, and I will make sure that you have a chance to share pictures, to get more ideas, to send you more resources. And I'd also be just always helpful and happy to work with you at any level that you want me to work. So, Karen.
Thank you, Dr. Dillon. I was a principal for a long time, and I just am taking away from this. These are really good things to talk about, like devote some time in a faculty meeting or regularly to talk about spaces. I don't think it's something we get a chance to talk about enough. We have so many other things ahead of that, but it makes such a huge difference. And I'm really struck by a couple of things that you showed us. And one is the picture where you said there was too much teacher space, the kind of white three-sided desk. Put that up at a faculty meeting and say, what do you think about this? Don't even what do you think, right? And what word comes to mind when you look at this? And I would bet you, well, if I was at that faculty meeting, I would write fortress. Okay. That's the teacher's fortress. Okay.
I use studio apartment. Yes.
Studio apartment. And the message is, that's the message, right?
Yeah.
And talking about something like that helps people maybe think more about their spaces. And also another thing I was thinking about is, wouldn't it be great to instead of as adults, we're always thinking, what's best for the kids and learn, we have to ask kids more. Just got to ask them sometimes, and so for a teacher, whether they teach first grade or eighth grade or physics in a lab, to say, let's take 10 minutes. I want you to get out a piece of paper and I want you to write something down. Tell me something about what you like about the physical layout appearance of this room that you're in, room 32, and what could be better? What could we change? Not just get all new furniture, we can't, but what could we change? Yeah. Kids will have ideas, move this over here, put that over there. And, I think those ideas are very valuable. And I think that simple thing of asking kids more brings this really important topic, and asking teachers more, devoting some real time at meetings and things to the space. It's just a great conversation to have with a lot of good potential for improving things in ways that don't take all of the huge resources, but small wins, we all know how important they are along that path. So
yeah, and
gave us a lot to think about.
I would say high schools that are doing this really well are asking students every other week.
Yeah.
Right. It's
every other week.
It's a feedback cycle, right? Like, and it's going, and there's a lot of low hanging fruit for leaders, right? Like, go get all of these really easy wins.
Yeah.
Build some momentum and, throw away the old stuff and tell people that they have some empowered decision-making around. Like, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here for folks.
There is. And I have to share one little story. I have 5 little grandsons. The youngest one, who's 8, is in 3rd grade. We live in a beautiful community and it has 7 beautiful elementary schools, and he's in a swing zone where they can go to one school or the other. And we were hoping for him to get into this particular school by accident. It's got to be by accident, and he did. And the school, it has the best reputation, but so many of the schools are really new and spiffy. This school that he's in is 100 years old. It was the original high school in the city part of town, right? It was the high school 100 years ago. It was made into an elementary school maybe 30 years ago, okay? Well, it has its issues, but it's a great school. And this is what happened. So my daughter and I brought him to drop off his stuff and meet the teacher on that day before school started in 3rd grade. And first of all, 3rd grade is on the 3rd floor. So man, oh man, I'm glad I'm not doing that all the time. But so we went up to the 3rd floor. It was a hotter than hot end of summer day. It was hot. And so we walked into his classroom and the teacher was there. And the first thing we all said was, thank God there's air conditioning. And the teacher said, she's wonderful. She said, I've been teaching 3rd grade in this classroom for 22 years. This is the first year we've had air conditioning. First. She has endured this, and they're going floor by floor, starting with the 3rd. So thank goodness this year with the heat, the 3rd floor of a 100-year-old building has air conditioning, because it's inhumane not to anymore. So this whole issue of space is just one that hopefully we can even explore more and just get people to talk about more. So if you joined us today, I hope you liked what the conversation. I hope that you have things to take away too. Feel free to share anything you'd like still in the chat, or unmute yourself right now and do so. And otherwise, we hope we see you all again really soon. And Dr. Dillon, we hope to see you back sometime.
Thank you. And thanks to Demco for having us all here today.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Greg. Everybody have a great evening.